Hi everyone. Tonight we're stepping into one of history's most chilling mysteries, a story where ambition met ice, where hope froze solid, and where 129 souls vanished into a white void that refused to give them back. Dim the lights if you can, maybe wrap yourself in something warm, because where we're going, the cold is absolute. The silence crushes, and the darkness lasts for months on end, swallowing time itself until you forget what sunlight feels like, what warmth means, what it is to be fully human. You're about to experience what it felt like to be trapped aboard two of the most advanced ships the British Royal Navy had ever constructed. Vessels packed with innovation and promise, steaming toward the Arctic in 1845 with steam engines, reinforced hulls, and enough supplies to last 3 years. You'll feel the gradual transformation of confidence into confusion into dread, and dread into something darker still. You'll taste metal on your tongue, not from fear alone, but from the very food meant to sustain you, slowly poisoning you from within. This isn't just a tale of exploration gone catastrophically wrong. It's about what happens when nature decides, with absolute indifference, that you don't belong. When your body, that faithful machine, begins to betray you in ways both subtle and grotesque. When the comfortable structures of civilization, hierarchy, morality, taboo, crack apart like frozen timber under pressure, and when survival, that most primal imperative, demands choices that would have been unthinkable mere months before. So settle in. Let the world outside your window fade to nothing. Let the ordinary sounds of your life recede, and walk with me into the white nightmare of the Franklin expedition, where the ice held secrets that would take over a century to uncover, and where every man who sailed north with such hope would find only the most bitter of endings. Take a deep breath. The journey begins. May 19th, 1845. Greenhithe, England. You stand on the deck of HMS Erebus, one hand gripping the varnished rail, still smooth, still new, the other shielding your eyes from the weak spring sun that filters through the Thames Valley mist. The river stretches before you, grey and restless, carrying you toward the sea and beyond it, toward frozen waters that exist only in maps and imagination. Behind you, the English coast grows smaller with each passing minute, the docks crowded with well-wishers waving handkerchiefs and hats, their cheers fading into the cry of gulls and the creak of rigging. You are one of 129 men, officers with polished buttons and confident bearing, ordinary sailors with weathered hands and steady eyes, engineers who understand the miracle of steam power, surgeons carrying instruments and medical texts, ice masters who've seen the Arctic before and lived to speak of it. Every single one of you has been handpicked for this voyage. Every man aboard believes, truly believes, in the mission that brought you here, to find and chart the Northwest Passage, that legendary route across the roof of the world that would connect Atlantic to Pacific and cement Britain's dominance over global commerce. Your ship, Erebus, is an absolute marvel of mid-19th century engineering. She weighs 378 tons, her hull reinforced with thick oak beams and iron plates specifically designed to withstand the crushing embrace of pack ice. Her sister ship, Terror, sails just behind you, slightly smaller at 331 tons, but equally formidable, equally prepared. Both vessels are equipped with converted railway locomotive engines that drive massive iron propellers. When wind fails, when sails go slack, you can power through at 4 knots, a steady mechanical heartbeat pushing you forward. When ice threatens, you can reverse, backing away from danger with unprecedented control. The provisions are staggering in their abundance. Enough food for 3 full years, 8,000 tins of meat, soup and vegetables, modern preservation technology, sealed and supposedly imperishable. Barrels upon barrels of salted pork and beef, their brine sloshing gently in the holds. Sacks of flour and sugar stacked to the ceiling, cases of lemon juice, that crucial defence against scurvy, the sailor's ancient enemy. Even live cattle, penned below deck in specially constructed stalls, their presence promising fresh meat in the early months. There's a library too, over 1,000 books carefully selected, novels, scientific treatises, religious texts, navigation manuals, enough reading material to occupy minds during the long polar nights. Someone even brought a monkey, a small creature named Jacko who already has the crew laughing with his antics, swinging from the rigging and stealing biscuits from distracted sailors. Your commander is Sir John Franklin, 59 years old, a man whose name is already written in the annals of Arctic exploration. He's led 2 previous expeditions into the frozen north, survived hardships that would have broken lesser men, and returned with valuable geographical knowledge and a reputation for steady leadership. He stands on the quarterdeck now, hands clasped behind his back in that characteristic pose, his weathered face calm and confident beneath his cap. There's grey in his hair, lines around his eyes, but his posture speaks of unshakable certainty. Beside him stands Captain Francis Crozier, commander of HMS Terror, a man who knows the Arctic better than almost anyone alive. Crozier is more cautious than Franklin, sometimes brooding, occasionally pessimistic, but that caution comes from experience, from having seen what the ice can do, from understanding that respect for the Arctic isn't cowardice but wisdom. The crew respects him deeply, even if they don't warm to him the way they do to the expedition's third in command. That would be Captain James Fitzjames, Franklin's second in command aboard Erebus. At 33, Fitzjames is young for such a position, charismatic and handsome, a man who writes poetry in his cabin and sketches landscapes with genuine talent. The sailors adore him. He knows their names, asks about their families, shares jokes and stories. If Franklin is the expedition's head and Crozier its conscience, Fitzjames is its heart, the man who makes this floating community feel less like a military operation and more like a fellowship of adventurers. The mood aboard is genuinely festive as England falls away behind you. Cheers echo from the docks until distance swallows them. Flags snap smartly in the breeze. Red and blue bright against grey sky somewhere below deck, a sailor has pulled out a fiddle, and its cheerful melody drifts up through the hatches, making feet tap and shoulders sway. You feel it too, that electric thrill of departure, that absolute certainty that this expedition will succeed where others have struggled. You will be the ones to conquer the passage. You will return as heroes. Your names in the newspapers, your faces known. But here's what you don't know yet, what you can't possibly know. The ice doesn't care about your steam engines or your confidence. The cold doesn't respect your iron plating or your 3 years of supplies. The Northwest Passage you're seeking sits behind a wall of frozen ocean that, in these particular years, with this particular climate, with these particular currents and temperatures, simply will not yield. You wave to the distant shore one last time. A few figures wave back, tiny and indistinct. Then the mist closes in, soft and grey, and England vanishes as though it never existed. You turn your face forward, toward the unknown, and the smile. The deck is solid beneath your boots. The engines throb with mechanical confidence. Your shipmates are strong and skilled. Everything will be fine, surely. The crossing to the Arctic is almost boringly uneventful, which everyone takes as a good sign. The Atlantic cooperates, her moods relatively calm for this time of year. The ships make good progress, their sails full, their hulls cutting cleanly through blue-grey water. You settle into the rhythms of shipboard life, watches and duties, meals and maintenance, the comfortable routines that make a vessel feel like home. You stop briefly at Stromness in the Orkney Islands, a rugged cluster of islands at Scotland's northern extreme. The crew goes ashore for a few hours, stretching legs on solid ground, purchasing last-minute supplies, tobacco, writing paper, small luxuries. In a local pub, you share a pint with shipmates, the beer cool and bitter and tasting of home. Outside the pub's small windows, the North Sea churns against ancient stone, and you think, this is the last British soil we'll touch for years. The thought is stirring, but also thrilling. From Stromness, you sail north into increasingly cold waters. The temperature drops degree by degree. You add layers, first a second shirt, then a wool vest, then a jacket. The sun stays visible longer each day, climbing higher before setting and then until one night you realise it barely dipped below the horizon at all. The perpetual twilight is strange, disorienting in a way that's hard to articulate. Time starts to feel slippery, less concrete. By early July, you've reached Greenland's west coast, specifically the Whalefish Islands in Disco Bay, a remote anchorage where icebergs drift past like frozen cathedrals, and the water is so cold it hurts your teeth if you drink it straight. Here you take on fresh water from a glacial stream, the water pure and shockingly cold, and here you slaughter the 10 cattle you've brought from England. The animals are led onto the ice one by one, Dispatched quickly and efficiently, their meat divided between both ships. Fresh beef is a rare luxury at sea, and the crew eats well that night. Steaks fried in butter, the smell heavenly after weeks of salt pork. This is also your last chance to send letters home. Paper is distributed, pens and ink passed around, and men sit in whatever quiet corners they can find, scratching out messages to wives, mothers, sweethearts, children. Your letter is cheerful, deliberately so. You mention Jacko, the mischievous monkey, and how he stole Lieutenant Irving's hat. You joke about the cold, nothing you can't handle, you write, laughing as the words form. You promise to return with stories of triumph and discovery, with sketches of icebergs and accounts of the passage's successful navigation. You seal the letter, press it into the hands of the supply ship's captain, and watch it disappear into a canvas bag with dozens of others. You don't know it yet, but that letter is the last word your family will ever receive from you. The last proof that you existed, that you were real and alive and hopeful. 5 men are sent home on the supply ship as well, sailors who've fallen ill with tuberculosis, their lungs rattling, their cheeks flushed with fever. It's a disappointment for them, being left behind before the real adventure begins, but everyone agrees it's the sensible choice. They're simply not strong enough for what lies ahead. The expedition's complement is now reduced to 124 men, a number that will be etched into history books and memorials, repeated in endless accounts of what came next. On July 12th, the supply ship casts off, turning back towards civilization. You watch her go, sails swelling, growing smaller against the grey horizon, until she's just a speck, then nothing. The last physical link to home is gone. From here on, you're truly alone, dependent entirely on yourselves and the ships beneath your feet. But that feels right, somehow. Appropriate. This is what exploration means. Cutting ties, pushing into the unknown, relying on skill and courage and a bit of luck. On July 26th, you have one final encounter with the world beyond, the ice. 2 whaling ships, Prince of Wales and Enterprise, are spotted near the entrance to Lancaster Sound, and you converge for a brief friendly meeting. The whalers are rough practical men, their ships stinking of blubber and blood, but they're experienced in these waters, and Franklin exchanges information with their captains. Ice conditions this year are heavy but manageable, they report. The passage into Lancaster Sound should open soon. Good hunting further west if you're interested, though of course you're not hunting whales. You're hunting glory. The crews exchange waves, shouted greetings, the brief camaraderie of sailors meeting in remote waters. Someone on Prince of Wales tosses over a package. Newspapers from a port you left weeks ago. Already ancient news, but treasured nonetheless. You'll read those papers a dozen times in the months to come, squeezing every word for distraction and connection to the world left behind. Then the whalers turn east, back toward their hunting grounds, and you turn west toward the unknown. The last outsiders to see you watch as Erebus and Terror steams steadily into Baffin Bay. Sails full, British flag snapping proudly, 2 ships perfectly equipped and confidently commanded, disappearing into the white wilderness. That's the image they carry back to civilization. Confident ships steaming into destiny, crews healthy and supplies plentiful. Every reason to expect success. That's the last anyone from the outside world will ever see of you. Let me tell you what it feels like to sail into Arctic waters for the first time, because this is where everything changes, where the world you know ends and something utterly alien begins. The water itself transforms. Back in the Atlantic, the ocean was deep blue or grey-green, opaque and familiar. Here it thickens somehow, becomes more viscous, colder in a way that seems impossible. Water that should be frozen but isn't quite, hovering just above the freezing point. So cold it burns when spray hits your face. The colour shifts to a pale grey-green, almost milky, as though the sea itself is freezing from within. And then you see your first iceberg. Nothing prepares you for the scale. You've seen icebergs in paintings, read descriptions in expedition accounts, but the reality is staggering. The berg drifts past like a floating mountain, its peak rising perhaps 60 feet above the waterline, and that's just the visible portion. 90% of its mass lurks below, an invisible threat to any ship that ventures too close. The ice glows with an internal light, pale blue and white, sculpted by wind and waves into shapes that seem almost alive. Arches and caverns, spires and overhangs. Water streams down its flanks, melting slowly in the brief Arctic summer. It's beautiful, achingly, terrifyingly beautiful. More bergs appear, dozens of them, then hundreds, drifting in a slow-motion parade from north to south, carved from Greenland's glaciers and now beginning their multi-year journey toward warmer waters where they'll eventually melt and disappear. Some are castle-sized, towering and magnificent. Others are low and treacherous, lurking just below the surface where they can gut a wooden hull in seconds. The lookouts are doubled, men posted at bow and in the rigging, their eyes scanning constantly for danger. The air changes too. It becomes cleaner somehow, sharper, as though you're breathing something purer than ordinary atmosphere. Each inhalation stings your lungs with cold that goes deeper than temperature. Something fundamental and aggressive about it. And the smell, or rather, the lack of smell. In England, in the Atlantic, there are always smells. Vegetation, sea spray, human habitation, cooking, industry. Here, there's nothing. Just clean emptiness, the scent of ice, if ice can be said to have a scent. Something mineral and ancient. And the light. The light is like nothing you've ever experienced. This is high summer in the Arctic. And the sun never sets. It circles the horizon endlessly, dipping low around midnight, but never quite disappearing, casting long shadows that wheel around like clock hands, stretching and bending across the ice. The world becomes a place without natural rhythm, without the comforting cycle of day and night. You try to maintain a schedule, watches and meals at regular intervals, but your body doesn't understand. Your internal clock, evolved over millennia to respond to sunrise and sunset, gets confused. Some men have trouble sleeping when it's bright outside at midnight. Others become perpetually drowsy, their circadian rhythms completely disrupted. Colours behave strangely too. The endless daylight washes everything pale. Blues become grey blues, whites become blinding, shadows turn deep purple. When you close your eyes, you see after-images of brightness, shapes that pulse and swirl. You sail west through Lancaster Sound, a broad channel between Devon Island to the north and Baffin Island to the south. The ice here is broken into large floes that drift and rotate, bumping against the hull with sounds that range from gentle taps to alarming thuds. You can hear it through the deck, a constant percussion, ice grinding against wood, a reminder that you're no longer in ordinary ocean but in a living, shifting environment that could trap you or crush you if you're careless. The steam engines prove their worth here. When the wind dies, when sails go slack, the engines chug steadily, their mechanical heartbeat pushing you forward through leads, narrow channels of open water between ice floes. The men who doubted the engines, who thought them unnecessary weight, become converts. This is what modern technology means. Not being at the mercy of wind and current, being able to choose your course, to force your way through obstacles. You continue west, then north up Wellington Channel, exploring territory that's barely been seen by European eyes. This excitement is palpable. You're writing the maps now, each observation and bearing adding to human knowledge. Officers take constant measurements, latitude, longitude, magnetic readings, depth soundings. The data is meticulously recorded in leather-bound logs that will be, everyone assumes, invaluable when you return home. You reach 77 degrees north farther than anyone expected to get in the first season. It's an accomplishment worth celebrating, and that night there's an extra ration of rum. Toast to the expedition's success, to the Queen, to the Navy, to England. Men sing songs, tell jokes, laugh with genuine joy. You're making history, and it feels glorious. Then you turn back south, following the west side of Cornwallis Island. The ice is getting heavier now, summer's brief thaw beginning to reverse as August wanes. Franklin makes the decision. It's time to find a harbour, somewhere safe to wait out the winter. The first season has been a stunning success. Excellent progress, good health, high morale. You'll winter in comfort, resume the expedition next summer when the ice breaks up, and complete the passage without serious difficulty. It all makes perfect sense, and that's when you find Beechey Island. Beechey Island isn't really an island. It's a small promontory on Devon Island's southwest corner connected by a narrow isthmus. But it offers what you need: a natural harbour with good holding ground for anchors, some protection from the worst winds, and enough flatland ashore to set up workshops and supplies. In early September, Erebus and Terror drop anchor in the bay. Within days, the ice begins to form around you. Thin sheets at first, easily broken, but thickening rapidly as temperatures plunge. By mid-September, the ships are locked solid, held in place by ice that grows thicker each day, eventually reaching several feet deep. You're not going anywhere until next summer. This is expected, planned for. The ships are well provisioned, well heated, and well commanded. Winter is an obstacle, yes, but a manageable one. The men set to work establishing a shore camp. Supplies are unloaded and organised. Building materials, tools, scientific instruments, spare sails and rope. A forge is set up, coal-fired for metalwork and repairs. A carpentry station with workbenches and hand tools. A magnetic observatory, a small shelter housing delicate instruments that will record the Earth's magnetic field throughout the winter. Valuable scientific data that will justify the expedition regardless of whether you find the passage. Hunting parties are organised. Men armed with muskets venturing onto the ice in search of game. Arctic foxes are spotted, their white fur nearly invisible against the snow. Per ptarmigan, plump Arctic grouse are occasionally flushed from the rocks. Once someone claims to have seen a polar bear in the distance, a yellowish shape moving across the ice, but by the time others arrive with rifles, it's gone. Fresh meat would be a tremendous boost to morale and health, but the animals are frustratingly scarce. The Arctic seems empty of life, a sterile white desert. To maintain morale during the long darkness ahead, the officers organise entertainment. Theatrical performances using jury-rigged stages, sailors playing both male and female roles to raucous laughter. Concerts featuring men with musical instruments, fiddles, whistles, an accordion someone brought from England. Education classes for younger sailors, teaching reading and writing, basic mathematics, anything to keep minds occupied. Church services every Sunday, Franklin himself leading prayers, his voice steady and reassuring in the makeshift chapel of the hold. But underneath the organised activity, small cracks are beginning to form. The first man dies on January 1st, 1846. New Year's Day, a grim way to begin the year. His name is John Torrington, just 20 years old, a petty officer aboard Terror. He's been ill for weeks, coughing constantly, his chest rattling with fluid, fever burning behind his eyes. The surgeons have done what they can, rest, warmth, small doses of medicine from their limited pharmacopoeia, but nothing helps. Tuberculosis, they decide, or pneumonia, or both, his lungs slowly drowning him from within. On New Year's Day, he stops breathing. His body is wrapped in canvas, sewn shut with careful stitches, and carried ashore. The burial is harsh work. The permafrost is like stone, frozen solid to depths of hundreds of feet, and digging a grave requires pickaxes and determination. Men take turns, chipping away at the frozen ground, progress measured in inches. It takes hours to carve out a shallow depression, barely deep enough to lay Torrington's wrapped body inside. Rocks are piled over him. There's not enough earth to fill the grave properly. A wooden headboard is crafted and placed at his head. His name and dates carved carefully. John Torrington died. January 1st, 1846, aged 20 years. 3 days later, John Hartnell dies. 25 years old, also from Terror, also claimed by some combination of pneumonia and tuberculosis. This death worries the surgeons enough that they perform an autopsy. Unusual at sea, invasive and unpleasant, but they need to understand what's killing men so early. They find inflamed lungs, some damage to the liver, but nothing conclusive. Nothing that explains why healthy young sailors are suddenly dying. Hartnell joins Torrington in the frozen ground, another headboard marking another loss. Then in April, a third, William Brain, 32, a Royal Marine from Erebus. He dies below deck, and because the weather is particularly brutal, winds howling, temperatures 50 below, his body is stored in the ship for several days before burial is possible. During that time, rats get to him, gnawing at his feet, a detail that makes men's stomachs turn. When he's finally buried, his body is hastily wrapped, his grave hastily carved. Everyone wanting to finish and get back to warmth. 3 men dead before the first winter is over. People try not to dwell on it. Death is part of seafaring life, always has been. Men die from disease, from accidents, from 1,000 causes beyond anyone's control. You mourn them properly, mark their graves and carry on with the work of living. Because soon, Surely soon the ice will break. Spring will come, the ships will sail again, and you'll continue toward your goal. But spring, when it finally arrives, brings a complication no one anticipated. The ice doesn't break. By late May 1846, the sun is circling overhead again, never setting, flooding the world with constant light. The temperatures rise slightly being a relative term, climbing from 50 below to maybe 20 below, and the surface snow begins to melt in places, creating shallow meltwater pools on the ice, mirror smooth and deceptively inviting. Everyone expects the ice to break. Last year, this was the time when Leeds opened, when you could see wobbly water, black and alive, between the floes. But this year, the ice remains stubbornly solid. Pressure ridges that formed during winter still stand, jagged walls of broken ice blocks piled on top of each other like frozen rubble. The ships remain locked in place, immobile. Still, the officers remain optimistic. It's early yet. The real thaw comes in July, August. Be patient. Trust the process. You venture out onto the ice more confidently now, your body adjusting to the environment. Walking on the frozen ocean is surreal. The surface is uneven, buckled into ridges and valleys where the ice has compressed and fractured, creating a landscape of chaotic geometry. Sometimes you find meltwater pools, shallow depressions filled with water that's just barely above freezing, reflecting the pale sky like mirrors. Other times you find pressure ridges, towering barriers you have to climb over or circumnavigate, the ice blocks sharp-edged and treacherously unstable. You can see Terror from here, anchored a few hundred meters away, her mast stark against the white horizon. Smoke curls from her stovepipe. They're cooking, keeping warm. Figures move on her deck, tiny at this distance. You wave. They wave back. It's comforting, that visible connection. Proof you're not completely alone. The officers organise sledging expeditions to explore the surrounding area, dragging sledges loaded with supplies, mapping the coastline, searching for signs of open water. Captain Fitzjames leads one party north, 9 men hauling a sledge, gone for a week. When they return, their faces are sunburned and windburned simultaneously, their eyes hollow with exhaustion, their movements stiff and painful. They found nothing promising, just more ice, stretching endlessly. Captain Crozier leads another party south, same result, ice, ice and more ice. By June, the reality becomes unavoidable. You will not be sailing this year, the ice that gripped. You in September has not released you, and now the brief window of navigability is closing again. You will spend a second winter trapped here, immobile, waiting. The morale shift is subtle but real. Jokes become less frequent. Laughter sounds forced. Men move through their duties with less energy, less enthusiasm. It's still manageable. You have plenty of supplies, plenty of food, but the psychological weight is growing. One winter you can endure with good spirits. 2 winters feels different, heavier. The expedition has stopped being an adventure and started becoming an ordeal. And then, in June, 2 men die in rapid succession. The first is Lieutenant Graham Gore, 33, a skilled surveyor and navigator, one of the most competent officers aboard. He falls ill in late May with symptoms that seem like influenza, fever, weakness, a cough that won't stop. But he doesn't improve. The fever climbs. He becomes delirious, muttering about things only he can see, his body burning itself up from within. On June 10th, he dies. The crew is shaken. Gore was strong, experienced, competent. If the Arctic could take him, it could take anyone. And then, the very next day, the unthinkable happens. Sir John Franklin dies. It happens suddenly, without warning. One moment he's standing on deck, surveying the ice, discussing next steps with Crozier. The next moment, he's clutching his chest, his face going pale, his knees buckling. The men rush to catch him, but by the time they lay him down, gently on the deck, he's already gone. Heart attack, the surgeons conclude, or stroke, or something they don't have words for, a sudden catastrophic failure of the system that keeps a human alive. The expedition's leader is dead. The man who held everything together, who spoke with calm authority, who embodied the mission itself, gone, just like that, in seconds. There's no burial at sea. The ocean is frozen solid, locked beneath your feet. Instead, Franklin's body is wrapped in canvas, sewn shut, placed in a wooden coffin hastily constructed from spare lumber. And he's buried somewhere on the ice, north of King William Island, in a grave that will remain frozen for eternity. his body preserved by the permafrost, his final resting place unmarked and unknown. Captain Francis Crozier assumes overall command of the expedition. Captain James Fitzjames becomes commander of Erebus, and the men, numb with grief and fear, return to the ships because there's nothing else to do. The ice still holds, the sun still circles, and the Arctic, indifferent to your loss, simply continues being what it is. Cold, empty, merciless. Waiting. The second winter is when things truly begin to deteriorate, though you don't recognise it at first. The changes are gradual, subtle, easy to dismiss as normal consequences of a prolonged Arctic sinking stay. You're tired all the time now. Bone-deep exhaustion that doesn't improve with rest. You wake up feeling like you barely slept. Your muscles aching for no apparent reason. Your joints stiff. Maybe it's just the cold, you tell yourself. Maybe it's the lack of sunlight during the winter darkness. Maybe it's perfectly normal. You start bruising easily. Dark purple blotches appear on your skin from the slightest impact. Bumping against a doorframe, gripping a rope too hard, even just pressure from your clothing. The bruises are slow to heal, lingering for weeks, spreading like ink stains under your skin. Your gums become sore, swollen, tender. When you bite into the ship's hard biscuit, they bleed, a metallic taste filling your mouth. You spit into your hand and see blood. You try to ignore it, but it keeps happening. Your gums are receding too, pulling back from your teeth, exposing roots that are sensitive to cold and pressure. The surgeons prescribe more lemon juice, the supposed cure-all for scurvy. You dutifully choke down your daily dose, grimacing at the sour taste, hoping it will help. It doesn't. The symptoms continue, worsening gradually. Here's what you don't know, what you can't possibly know. The lemon juice you're drinking has been stored for over a year in those tin containers with their lead-soldered seams. Vitamin C is fragile, breaking down with time and exposure to light and air. By now, most of the protective vitamin has degraded to uselessness. You're drinking a placebo liquid false hope while scurvy slowly takes hold. But scurvy isn't your only problem. There's something else, something more insidious, poisoning you from within. The tinned food that makes up the bulk of your diet was sealed hastily. The contract went to a supplier named Stephen Goldner, who won the bid just 7 weeks before the expedition departed, an impossibly short time to prepare 8,000 tins. To meet the deadline, corners were cut, quality control suffered, and most damningly, the tins were sealed with thick beads of lead solder that dripped down the inside seams, coming into direct contact with the food. Every time you eat from those tins, and you eat from them constantly, day after day, meal after meal, you ingest tiny amounts of lead. It accumulates in your bones, your blood, your brain. The poisoning is slow, chronic, invisible, and the symptoms overlap confusingly with scurvy, making it possible for the surgeons to distinguish between them. Lead poisoning causes fatigue, muscle weakness, abdominal pain, irritability, confusion, difficulty concentrating, tremors, in severe cases, seizures and madness. You're experiencing some of these symptoms now, but you attribute them to other causes. You're tired because you're not sleeping well. You're confused because the endless polar day disrupts your sense of time. You're irritable because you're trapped, bored, frustrated. But some of the men are exhibiting stranger symptoms. One sailor becomes convinced the ship is sinking, even though you're frozen in solid ice. He panics, tries to abandon ship, has to be physically restrained by his shipmates. Another starts seeing things, shapes moving in the darkness, voices calling his name from the ice. The officers dismiss it as cabin fever, the psychological toll of isolation and confinement. But it's more than psychology. It's neurotoxicity, lead literally destroying brain tissue, creating hallucinations and paranoia. You feel it too sometimes. A fog in your thoughts, like you're thinking through wool. Difficulty focusing on complex tasks, memory lapses. What were you doing 5 minutes ago? What did that officer just say? You forget names, dates, sequences of events. Days blur together, one indistinguishable from the next. And there's something else, harder to articulate. A sense of a wrongness. A feeling that your body isn't quite your own anymore. That it's betraying you in small ways you can't identify. You're slower. Clumsier. Your reflexes are off. You drop things, trip over nothing. You tell yourself you're imagining it. Everyone feels this way after so long at sea, so long in the cold. It's normal. It will pass. But deep down in some quiet corner of your mind that still thinks clearly, you know something is very wrong. By the winter of 1847, the death toll is climbing steadily. Not dramatically, not all at once like some plague ship, but week by week, month by month, someone else dies. Pneumonia, tuberculosis, exhaustion. Unknown causes. The surgeons record each death meticulously in their logs, noting symptoms, duration, time of death, their best guesses at cause, but they can't stop it. 1847 medicine is limited. No antibiotics, no real understanding of vitamins or deficiency diseases, no way to reverse the damage being done to bodies by lead and malnutrition. The dead are buried on the ice now because there's no room on the ships for bodies, and the ground beneath the ice is impossibly hard. Graves are chipped out with pickaxes, shallow depressions in the frozen surface, and the bodies are laid to rest wrapped in canvas. Sometimes there's a short service, an officer reading from the Bible, a few words about the deceased. Sometimes not, depending on weather and circumstances and how exhausted everyone is. You attend a burial one day in December. The temperature is 40 below, the wind cutting through every layer you wear, finding skin and stealing warmth with vicious efficiency. The chaplain reads, his breath pluming white, his words nearly lost in the howl of wind. I am the resurrection and the life. Though he were dead, yet shall he live. The body, unidentifiable beneath its canvas shroud, is lowered into the ice. Snow is shoveled over it. And that's that. Another name crossed off the roster. Another ghost haunting the expedition. By early 1848, you've lost 30 men, 1/4 of the original crew, and you haven't even left the ships yet. The atmosphere inside the vessels has deteriorated markedly. The ships feel smaller now, darker, the walls pressing in. The air is stale, thick with the smell of unwashed bodies. No one bathes much anymore. It's too cold, too much effort, and damp wool that never quite dries. The heating system struggles to keep up, coal being rationed now, but no one knows how much longer you'll need it. And the holds are colder than they were in the first winter, the chills seeping through every crack and seam. The food situation remains adequate in terms of quantity. There are still thousands of tins in the holds, still barrels of salt meat, but the quality is declining noticeably. Some tins, when opened, reveal spoiled contents. The meat is grey and slimy, the vegetables blackened, the smell putrid. You eat them anyway, because what choice do you have? You try not to taste it, swallowing quickly, washing it down with tea made from melted snow. The monotony is crushing now, a weight on your chest, a pressure behind your eyes. Every day is identical to the one before. Wake up in your bunk, cold and stiff, eat a sparse breakfast, hard biscuit, weak tea. Perform your assigned duties, maintenance, cleaning, hauling supplies. Eat a thin lunch, more duties, eat a meagre dinner. Lie down to sleep, repeat. There are no more theatrical performances. The library sits untouched. No one has energy for reading. The concerts have stopped. You just exist, waiting for something to change, waiting for the ice to break, waiting for rescue that you're starting to suspect isn't coming. Because here's the thing, back in England, people are worried. It's been almost 3 years since you left. Franklin was supposed to send word, supposed to check in with whaling stations, supposed to emerge from the Arctic by now, but there's been nothing. Just silence, an absence where communication should be. Lady Franklin, Sir John's devoted wife, is petitioning the Admiralty relentlessly, demanding they send search parties. But the Admiralty is slow to act, bureaucratic, convinced that you have enough supplies, that you're safe, that you'll appear when you're ready. They believe in Franklin, in the ships, in British capability and preparedness. They're wrong, of course, catastrophically wrong. But by the time they realise it, by the time search expeditions are finally organised and dispatched, it will be far too late. You don't know any of this, trapped in your frozen prison. You just know that no one is coming. The ice shows no sign of breaking. Your body is failing, though you don't fully understand why or how. And a new idea is beginning to circulate among the officers, whispered in private conferences, discussed in hushed tones. Maybe it's time to abandon the ships and march south. April 1848. Nearly 3 years since you left England. 19 months trapped in the ice. 2 brutal Arctic winters endured. and the situation has become untenable. The ships are sound, structurally they're fine, the hull's intact, the ice hasn't crushed them, but then they're not going anywhere. The ice that gripped you in September 1846 hasn't released you, hasn't even loosened, and more importantly, the men are dying. Not from accidents or sudden illness, but from a slow, grinding attrition that's whittling down your numbers and strength week by week. The officers convene a final conference in Franklin's old cabin, now Crozier's, though it still feels like Franklin's ghost occupies the space. The discussion is pragmatic, clinical, devoid of false optimism. Here are the facts. 105 men remain alive out of the original 124 who entered the ice. That's a mortality rate of about 15%, and it's accelerating. Scurvy is widespread now, though the surgeons still don't understand why the lemon juice isn't helping. Lead poisoning, undiagnosed and misunderstood, is sapping everyone's strength and mental clarity. The supplies, while still substantial in quantity, are of increasingly dubious quality. More critically, the ships are 20 kilometres from shore, 20 kilometres of broken, jagged ice, pressure ridges, refrozen leads, unstable surfaces that shift without warning. If the ice breaks up suddenly during summer, everyone aboard could drown or be crushed. Better to reach land, to have solid ground beneath your feet, to start moving towards civilization. The nearest outpost is Fort Resolution on the Great Slave Lake, over the 1,500 kilometres to the south and east, impossibly far. But there's a closer option, the Back River, also called Back's Fish River, which flows north to the Arctic coast about 400 kilometres south of your current position. If you can reach the river, you can follow it south, and along its course are Hudson's Bay Company posts, trading stations where you might find supplies, help, native peoples who can guide you. 400 kilometres. It's a staggering distance to cover on foot, dragging supplies in a hostile environment. But staying on the ships means certain death, slow and cold and helpless. Captain Crozier makes the decision. On April 22nd, 1848, the ships will be abandoned. The crew will form into parties, each group responsible for dragging a lifeboat mounted on a sledge. The boats will serve as shelter and as a means to cross rivers or open water. Every man will carry as much as he can, food, clothing, weapons, tools. Everything else will be left behind. The announcement is made. Some men receive it with relief. Finally, action, movement, a plan. Others are clearly terrified. Leaving the ships feels like cutting the last line to safety, stepping into the unknown with no retreat possible. But no one argues. Discipline holds. The Royal Navy trained you well. The next 4 days are a frenzy of preparation. The lifeboats, massive wooden vessels, each weighing over 600 kilograms empty, are mounted onto sledges that have been built over the past months. Supplies are sorted and packed. Tins of food, cooking stoves, blankets, spare clothing, rifles and ammunition, hand tools, rope, canvas for shelters. And then, bewilderingly, absurdly, the officers insist on packing items that have no conceivable survival value. Silverware, forks, spoons, knives, all sterling silver, heavy and useless, silk handkerchiefs, books, not survival manuals but novels, religious texts, poetry, soap, lots of soap, a writing desk, button polish, even some decorative items, brass fittings, things that might have mattered in civilization but mean nothing out here. You watch these items being loaded and want to object, want to point out the insanity of it, but you don't. Because the officers are making these decisions, and you're just a sailor, and the whole situation is so surreal that maybe sterling silver spoons do make sense somehow. On April 25th, 3 days before the planned departure, Fitzjames and Crozier compose a final message. They use a standard Admiralty form, a pre-printed document designed for expedition records, filling it in with careful handwriting. The message is brief, clinical, devastating. HM ships Terror and Erebus were deserted on the 2nd of April, 5 leagues and W of this, having been beset since 12th of September 1846. Sir John Franklin died on the 11th of June 1847, and the total loss by deaths in the expedition has been to this date 9 officers and 15 men. Crozier adds a final line in his cramped handwriting, and start on tomorrow 26th for Back's Fish River. The note is placed in a metal cylinder and deposited in a cairn at Victory Point, on the northwest coast of King William Island. It's the last official record of the expedition. The last proof that you existed, that you tried, that you haven't simply vanished without trace. And then, on April 26, 1848, 105 men step off the ships and onto the ice. You are one of them. Your pack is heavy on your shoulders, the rope harness cutting into your chest as you take up your position in the hauling team. Behind you, Erebus and Terror sit silent and abandoned, their masts standing stark against the pale sky like tombstones. Ahead lies 400 kilometres of frozen hell, and you've just taken the first step. Here's what no one tells you about man-hauling in the Arctic. It destroys you. Not quickly, not dramatically, but with a relentless grinding efficiency that breaks down your body cell by cell, muscle fibre by muscle fibre, until you're barely human anymore. The sledge you're helping to pull weighs close to a ton when fully loaded. 600 kilograms of boat, plus hundreds more of supplies, food, equipment, weapons. 20 men to a rope, each of you leaning forward into the harness, your body at a 45-degree angle, your legs driving, your shoulders and chest taking the strain. The first metre is always the hardest. The sledge, heavy and inert, resists movement with dumb stubbornness. Everyone pulls together, grunting with effort, boots scrabbling for purchase on the ice. The runners scrape forward an inch. Another. Inch! Then suddenly it breaks free and you're moving, the sledge sliding behind you with a sound like a long, tormented sigh. Step. Drag. Drag. That's the rhythm. You lean forward, drive with your legs, drag the weight behind you, or rest for a moment. Lean forward again. Drive. Drag. It's hypnotic, mind-numbing, exhausting beyond anything you've experienced. And the ice isn't smooth. Far from it. The surface is chaos. Pressure ridges piled into walls of broken blocks, some as tall as a man, forcing you to detour or unload the sledge and carry everything over by hand before reloading on the other side. Refrozen leads where the ice is thin and treacherous, creaking ominously under the weight, threatening to collapse. Areas where the snow is deep and soft, each step sinking knee-deep, requiring twice the effort to make half the progress. Listen to the sounds. The scrape of wooden runners on ice, rhythmic and relentless, the crunch of boots in snow, the ragged breathing of men who haven't eaten properly in months, whose bodies are already weakened by scurvy and lead poisoning, whose muscles are wasting away. Someone coughs, wet, deep, rattling in the lungs. No one comments. You just keep pulling. By the end of the first day, you've covered maybe 3 kilometres. 3, and you have 400 to go. The math is simple and horrifying. At this rate, it will take 4 months to reach the back river. 4 months of hauling, of cold, of dwindling supplies. 4 months you don't have. That night, the boats are unpacked to create shelter. The lifeboats are overturned, canvas tarps stretched over them to block wind, creating low, cramped spaces where men huddle together shoulder to shoulder. A small stove is lit, precious coal fed carefully, the flame tiny and inadequate, but better than nothing. Someone opens a tin of soup and the contents are heated in a pot until they melt from frozen solid to merely cold. Each man gets 3 swallows. That's it. That's dinner. An officer, Lieutenant Irving, or maybe someone else, the faces are becoming interchangeable. Gaunt and frostbitten, reads from the Bible. His voice is calm, almost soothing. The familiar words are comfort in this alien place. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. You close your eyes and try to let the words carry you somewhere else. Somewhere warm, somewhere with sun and grass and birdsong, somewhere you'll never see again, but the cold won't let you escape. Seeps through the canvas, through your coat, through your skin, settling into your bones. You curl tighter, pulling the thin blanket up to your chin, pressing against the man next to you, stealing shared warmth. His body shakes with shivers. So does yours. You lie there in the dim lantern light, the wind howling outside, and you try to sleep. Sleep doesn't come easily. Your body aches everywhere, shoulders screaming from the harness, legs trembling with exhaustion, joints inflamed and painful. Your stomach gnaws at itself. 3 swallows of soup utterly inadequate. Your mind races despite your exhaustion, thoughts circling. We can't do this. We can't make 400 kilometres like this. We're going to die out here. You push the thoughts away. Focus on breathing, on the rise and fall of your chest, on the fact that you're still alive, still fighting. Tomorrow you'll pull again, and the day after, and the day after that, until you can't. 3 weeks into the march, or is it 4? Time is losing meaning, days blending together in an endless cycle of pull, rest, eat, sleep. You're leaving a trail, not intentionally, not as markers for rescue parties, but because things break, things are abandoned and men die. The sledges themselves are shedding components. A runner cracks, has to be replaced with improvised repairs that barely hold. A rope snaps under the strain, frays beyond use. Items that seemed essential back at the ships are quietly left behind now, deemed too heavy, too pointless. You pass a discarded crate one day, its contents spilled across the ice, soap bars, dozens of them, white and perfectly useless. A few 100 meters later, someone has abandoned a bag of button polish. Then a pile of books, their pages fluttering in the wind, and then there are the bodies. The first man falls on day 5. He just stops, sits down in the snow, his legs giving out, and refuses to get up. His name, you think it's Thomas or maybe William. The names are all running together. Doesn't matter much at this point. His face is grey, his eyes unfocused, staring at something only he can see. The officers try to motivate him, to order him to stand, to appeal to his duty and courage. He doesn't respond, doesn't even seem to hear. He's still breathing, but something essential has left him. Some spark of will that kept him moving. Captain Crozier makes the hard decision. We can't carry him. We move on. So you do. You turn away from the sitting man and resume pulling. His figure grows smaller behind you, a dark shape against white, and you try not to think about how long he'll last. Hours? Minutes? Will he freeze first, or will his heart simply give out? You don't look back. That night, lying in the boat shelter, you stare at the canvas ceiling and see his face. You'll be seeing it for the rest of your life, however long that is. More men fall over the following weeks. Some die while walking, their hearts stopping mid-step, their bodies collapsing face first into the snow. Others simply can't rise in the morning, their bodies too weak, too damaged. A few wander off during the night, confused, delirious, walking into the white and vanishing. You search for them sometimes, calling names, but the Arctic swallows them completely. By the time you reach the shore of King William Island, you've lost 15 men, and the shore, when you finally stumble onto it, offers no comfort. Just rocks and frozen tundra, slightly more solid than ice, but no warmer, no more welcoming. The boats are even harder to pull over to land. The runners, designed for ice, catch on stones, on frozen tufts of grass, on the uneven terrain. Progress slows to a crawl, meters per hour instead of kilometers per day. The officers make another decision, lighten the load. More items are abandoned. The silverware, finally, is left in a pile on the rocks. Books are left behind, their pages riffling in the wind, Shakespeare and Psalms scattered across the Arctic. Tools are evaluated, essential ones kept, redundant ones discarded. But it's not enough. The sledges are still too heavy, the men are too weak, and the food is running out. You've been rationing from the start, of course, but even the careful rationing can't make finite supplies infinite. The tins are being depleted faster than anyone planned, partly because some contain spoiled food that can't be eaten, partly because the cold and exertion require more calories than anyone anticipated, partly because there's simply no way to carry a 4 months' worth of food for 100 men. By early June, maybe late May, you're not sure anymore, the rations are cut, then cut again. Your stomach, already hollow with hunger, becomes a constant source of pain, gnawing at itself, demanding food your body doesn't have. You fantasize about meals, not fancy banquets, just anything. A potato, boiled and plain, a piece of bread with butter, a handful of oats. Your mind conjures these images with cruel vividness, the textures and flavours so real you can almost taste them. Then you open your eyes and you're still here, still cold, still starving. You chew on anything that might trick your stomach. Leather straps, bootlaces, strips of canvas. They don't provide nutrition, but the act of chewing, of having something in your mouth, offers the faintest psychological relief. It doesn't last. 2 months into the march, approximately time has become meaningless. You reach a small tidal island in a place that will later be called Erebus Bay. It's unremarkable, just a rocky outcrop on King William Island's southern coast. But the officers decide to stop here for a few days, to rest, to take stock. The boats are unloaded and positioned as shelter. Men collapse into exhausted heaps, too tired to even remove their harnesses properly. Your hands are destroyed, blistered, bleeding, frozen, some fingers blackened with frostbite. Your feet are worse, though you try not to look at them. Taking off your boots has become terrifying because you might see the things you can't unsee, damage that can't be repaired. While men rest, a small party is organised to build another cairn, another marker, another message to whoever might someday come looking. You help carry stones, your movements mechanical, your breath rasping. The cairn rises slowly, rock by rock. But there's no message left this time. No note, no record. Either because there's no paper, no pencil, or because there's simply nothing left to say that hasn't already been said at Victory Point. You're heading south, you're dying. That's the story. While you're here, camped at this desolate spot, something shifts in the group dynamic. It's subtle, hard to define, but you feel it. Men are watching each other differently now, not with camaraderie, not with the easy trust of shipmates, but with calculation, with suspicion. The weak are being evaluated. Not explicitly, not openly, but you see the glances, the whispered conversations that stop when you approach. And you wonder, am I one of the weak? Am I being assessed? You try to stand straighter, to hide your limp, to suppress your coughing. Because being weak in this place, in this situation, is becoming dangerous in ways you don't want to contemplate. Food is distributed. That night, a half tin shared among 5 men. You crowd around as it's opened, watching hungrily as the frozen contents are heated. The smell makes your mouth water, even though it's vaguely rotten, metallic. You get your portion, 3 spoonfuls of lukewarm mush, and it's gone in seconds. Then you notice something. Some of the men, the ones who've been whispering, the ones who stick together, look slightly less skeletal than the others. Their eyes are clearer, their movements less sluggish, and you wonder, with a sick feeling in your stomach, whether they've found a supplemental food source. Whether the men who wandered off, who disappeared during the night, actually disappeared. You push the thought away. It's unthinkable, impossible. You're British, civilised, Royal Navy. These are good men, brave men. But the thought doesn't leave. It sits in the back of your mind, growing like mould. That night, lying in the boat, you hear whispers. You can't make out words, just the rhythm of urgent, hushed conversation. And then a sound, a thud, a quickly muffled cry. You squeeze your eyes shut and pretend you heard nothing. Pretend you're somewhere else, anywhere else. By morning, 1 man is missing. No one mentions it. No one asks. The count is 105, then suddenly it's 104 and everyone just accepts it. The boats are loaded, the ropes are shouldered, and you walk, because the alternative, stopping, questioning, acknowledging what's happening, is impossible. So you walk, you pull, and you try not to think. Here's what prolonged starvation does to a human being. It's not just discomfort, not just the absence of food. It's a fundamental rewiring of everything that makes you you. Your body, deprived of calories, enters survival mode. It burns through your fat reserves first, but you ran out of those weeks ago. Then it consumes muscle tissue, breaking down proteins to fuel essential functions. Your heart is muscle. Your diaphragm is muscle. Your body is literally eating itself, cannibalizing its own tissues to stay alive a little longer. Your immune system shuts down. Infections that your body would normally fight off become dangerous, potentially lethal. That small cut on your hand, it's infected now, red and swollen, pus weeping from the wound. Your bleeding gums, they're not healing, becoming ulcerated, the infection spreading. Your brain, desperate for glucose, begins to malfunction. Concentration becomes impossible. Memory falters, decision-making, reasoning, anything complex. It all requires energy your brain doesn't have. You start making mistakes, forgetting things, losing track of what you were doing mid-task. And then there are the hallucinations. They start small. Peripheral movement that vanishes when you look directly at it. Sounds that might be real or might not. Voices calling your name, footsteps behind you on the ice. You tell yourself it's the wind, the ice creaking, your imagination. But they intensify. You see people who aren't there standing in the distance, waving. Sometimes they're shipmates who died weeks ago. Sometimes they're strangers. You see buildings on the horizon, impossibly placed. Churches, houses, entire towns that vanish when you blink. The worst are the food hallucinations. You smell cooking meat, so vivid and real that your mouth floods with saliva. You see tables laden with food. so detailed you can count the roasted chickens, the bowls of vegetables, the loaves of bread. You reach out to touch them, and your hand closes on empty air. These visions are torture. Each one reminds your body of what it desperately needs and can't have. Each one drives you a little bit madder, and underneath it all, beneath the hallucinations and the failing memory and the physical collapse, something primal is waking up. Something that's been asleep for centuries of civilization, buried under layers of culture and morality and learned behavior. The survival instinct, raw, amoral, absolute. Your body knows what it needs. Protein, fat, calories. And your body, in its desperation, is starting to whisper suggestions that horrify your conscious mind. Those suggestions are becoming harder to ignore. You don't know exactly when it happens, not the precise moment when someone crosses the line, when desperation finally overwhelms every moral prohibition drilled into you from childhood. But you know it has happened. 3 men die one night. Exposure, the officer's record, exhaustion, natural causes, as natural as anything is out here. But in the morning, when the bodies are checked, you notice things. Details that don't quite make sense. The way the clothing has been disturbed, pulled aside, the way certain areas of the bodies look different. Not just dead, but altered somehow. No one says anything. Everyone sees it. No one says anything. The bodies are left where they are. The expedition moves on. And that night, when food is distributed, some portions are slightly larger than they should be. The men who receive them eat quickly, furtively, their eyes downcast. You don't ask what they're eating. You don't want to know, you can't afford to know, because if you acknowledge it, if you name it, then you have to decide what you think about it, what you'll do about it, and you're not ready for that. Not yet, but your body is. Your body smells the protein, even if your mind refuses to identify it. Your stomach clenches with hunger, saliva flooding your mouth. Every cell in your body is screaming for nutrition, demanding it, insisting that nothing else matters. Not morality, not civilization, not the rules of the world you came from. Just survival. Just one more day of life. You turn away, curl up in your spot, close your eyes, but you can't unhear the sounds of chewing, can't unsmell the faint aroma of cooked meat. And the next morning, when you wake, you notice you're stronger. Not much, but noticeably. The fog in your mind has lifted slightly. Your muscles respond better. You realise, whoever ate last night gained strength, gained advantage, gained days or weeks of life. And you, by refusing, by clinging to civilization, have lost ground. The expedition isn't a unified group anymore. It's fracturing into smaller parties, men clustering with those they trust, avoiding those they don't. The officers have lost control of the situation, not because of mutiny or insubordination, but because authority requires resources. Food, warmth, hope, and all of those are gone. You're on your own now. Every man for himself, though no one says it aloud. You walk south, always south, because that's the direction you've been walking, and changing course requires energy and thought you don't have. You put one foot in front of the other. Sometimes you're alone. Sometimes there are others nearby, shadowy figures in the distance, moving parallel to you but not together. You find a body one day, face down in the snow. You don't recognize him, don't try to. You stand there swaying, looking down at this thing that used to be human, and you have a choice. Walk away, preserve your humanity, die with your morals intact, or survive. Your hand moves without conscious decision, reaching for your knife. By late summer 1848, or maybe early fall, you've completely lost track. The expedition has disintegrated entirely. The neat military organisation is gone, the chain of command dissolved. What remains are small clusters of men scattered across King William Island and the nearby mainland, each group fighting its own desperate battle against starvation and cold. You're in a group of maybe 5 or 6 men. You're not sure of the exact number because it keeps changing. Someone is there one day and gone the next. You don't ask where they went. You don't want to know. The boat was abandoned weeks ago. You couldn't pull it anymore, didn't have the strength, and the officers finally admitted the obvious. Dragging a half-ton boat was killing you faster than it was helping. So you took what you could carry, a blanket, a tin cup, maybe a tarpaulin for shelter, and left the rest. Somewhere behind you, stretching across hundreds of kilometres of ice and tundra, lies a trail of debris. Sledges, Boats, supplies, silver spoons and books and button polish, scattered like offerings to a god who doesn't care. And bodies, oh many bodies, in various states of preservation and violation, marking your passage like grotesque breadcrumbs. You walk south because that's what you've been doing, and you've forgotten how to stop. Your body is skeletal now, skin stretched over bones, your clothes hanging loose, your teeth have all fallen out, making eating difficult even when there's something to eat. Your gums are infected, rotting, the smell of them making you gag when you breathe through your mouth. Your feet are the worst. You haven't taken your boots off in weeks. The thought terrifies you, the knowledge of what you'll find if you do. But you can feel it. The wrongness, the deadness. Your toes are gone, you're certain of that, rotted or frozen or both. You walk on stumps wrapped in leather, each step agony. But you keep walking because stopping means dying. The hallucinations are constant now, indistinguishable from reality. You see shipmates who died months ago walking beside you, having conversations. You see Captain Franklin sometimes, standing on the ice in his full dress uniform, smiling paternally. You see your mother calling you home for dinner, her voice so real you answer out loud. And sometimes, this is the hardest part, you're not sure if you're actually walking or just dreaming that you are. You'll snap into awareness and discover you're lying in the snow or sitting with no memory of stopping or walking in circles. Your mind is going, you know that. The starvation, the lead poisoning, the months of stress and horror, they've broken something fundamental in your brain. You're not thinking clearly anymore, haven't been for a long time, but you're still alive, somehow. Against all odds, though alive might be too strong a word for what you are now. You find another boat one day. Or maybe it finds you. You're not sure of the sequence anymore. Causality has become slippery. Is one of the expedition's lifeboats abandoned on the shore? The sledge tilted at an angle where it snagged on rocks. The boat is overturned, creating a small shelter underneath. And something about it calls to you. Not hope, you're beyond hope, but the promise of rest, of a place to lie down out of the wind. You approach cautiously. Something about the place feels wrong, the air heavy with a presence you can't name. You look underneath the boat and immediately recoil. Bodies. 4 of them, maybe 5. It's hard to tell where one ends and another begins. They died here, huddled together, seeking shared warmth that never came. The Arctic has preserved them, their faces frozen in final expressions. Mouths open, eyes wide, staring at eternity. But that's not what makes you recoil. It's what was done to them, or what they did to each other, or both. Bones cracked open, the marrow extracted. Skulls shattered, the brains consumed. Flesh stripped from limbs with methodical efficiency. These men didn't just die together, they cannibalized each other, possibly while still alive, in a final desperate attempt at survival. Tools are scattered around. Knives, a small saw, a pot with burned residue inside. The archaeology of horror. You should leave, get away from this cursed place. But you notice something, supplies. Tins, overlooked or abandoned, still stored in the boat. Maybe half a dozen. Your hands shake as you reach for one. The tin is frozen solid, the contents expanded with ice. You use a rock to smash it open, not caring about the mess, and inside, food. Actual food. Preserved meat, maybe pork, maybe beef. You don't care what it is. You claw at it with destroyed hands, shoving frozen chunks into your toothless mouth. Your gums bleeding, your throat swallowing compulsively. It tastes like life, like salvation, like everything good you've ever experienced distilled into frozen chunks of mystery meat. You eat until the tin is empty, then you eat another, and another. Your stomach, shrunken and weak, cramps violently. You double over, gasping, pain radiating from your core, but you don't vomit. Your body is too desperate to waste any of this precious nutrition. You take the remaining tins and stuff them into your pockets, your coat, anywhere they'll fit. Then you leave that place, walking faster than you have in days, trying to put distance between yourself and the bodies and the knowledge of what happened there. Because you've seen your future. That's what you are now. That's what starvation reduces humans to. Scavenging animals, picking over the bones of the dead, consuming whatever's available, morality a luxury you can't afford. The food from the tins gives you a surge of energy, enough to keep moving for another week, maybe 2, but eventually, inevitably, the tins are empty, and you're alone again. Truly, completely alone. You haven't seen another living person in, how long? Days? Weeks? The last man in your group disappeared, walked off one morning and didn't come back. You didn't search for him, didn't call his name, you just watched him go and felt nothing. If you're the last survivor of the Franklin expedition, you don't know it. There could be others scattered across this frozen wasteland, struggling just like you. Or you could be the final man standing, the last ember of a fire that's almost extinguished. Either way, it doesn't matter. You're still going to die. Your body is shutting down now, systems failing in sequence. Your heart beats irregularly, skipping beats, fluttering weakly in your chest. Your kidneys have stopped processing waste properly, toxins building up in your blood. Your liver is failing, unable to perform its filtering functions. Your brain, starved of oxygen and glucose, is functioning at a fraction of its capacity. You know, in some distant analytical way that you're in the final stages. Hours, maybe a day or two. No more. You should feel something about that. Fear, regret, sadness. But you don't. You're too tired, too damaged. You've been dying for so long that the actual moment of death feels like a formality. A transition from one state to another that's barely different. You keep walking anyway, because that's what you do, because stopping requires a decision and you're beyond making decisions. One foot, then the other. Again. The landscape is unchanging. Rocks, snow, more snow. The sun circles overhead, meaningless. You don't know if it's day or night, summer or winter. Time has collapsed into an eternal present tense of movement and cold. You see things that aren't there. Ships in the distance. Towns on the horizon. People waving. You don't react anymore. You just keep walking, your vision tunneling, the world shrinking to the few meters directly in front of you. Your legs give out. You don't fall so much as crumple, your body simply ceasing to support itself. You lie there in the snow, too exhausted to even turn your head, staring at pale sky. This is it, you realise. This is where the story ends. Not dramatically, not heroically, just here. Lying in the snow on some nameless stretch of Canadian Arctic coastline, alone and forgotten. You think about home one last time, about faces you'll never see again, about the life you'll never live, about all the futures that evaporated somewhere between England and this frozen hell. And then you think about nothing at all. Your heartbeat slows, lub-dub, long pause, lub-da, dub, longer pause. Your breathing becomes shallow, irregular. In, longer pause. The cold, which has been your enemy for so long, becomes almost comfortable, like sinking into a warm bath. The pain fades, the hunger fades, everything fades. Your heart beats once more, twice, then stops, and the Arctic claims its final victim. 129 men left England with such hope. 0 returned. While you were dying on the ice, the world was searching for you. Lady Franklin, Sir John's devoted and determined wife, refused to accept silence as an answer. For years she petitioned, fundraised, organised and demanded that the Admiralty, the government, anyone with resources, mount search expeditions. Her husband was out there. His men were out there. They could still be saved. The first search expeditions were launched in 1848, 3 years after your departure. Over the next 15 years, more than 30 separate expeditions would venture into the Arctic searching for Franklin, mapping vast stretches of previously unknown territory, discovering multiple potential northwest passages, and gradually piecing together the puzzle of what happened. Ironically, you accomplished your mission. Not you personally, you died alone. On King William Island, your body eventually lost to time and ice. But the search for Franklin led directly to the mapping of the Northwest Passage. Multiple routes were discovered and charted. The geographical puzzle was solved. You just weren't alive to see it. In 1850, searchers found your first winter camp on Beechey Island. They discovered the 3 graves, Torrington, Hartnell, Brain, perfectly preserved in the permafrost, their wooden headboards still standing, names still legible. They found artifacts, discarded equipment, evidence of your presence, but no message, no note explaining where you went next. In 1854, Dr. John Ray, a Scottish explorer mapping the Boothia Peninsula, encountered Inuit hunters who told him stories about white men, starving and desperate, walking south years earlier. The Inuit showed him artifacts, silver spoons, medals, uniform buttons, all identifiable as Franklin expedition items. and they warped him something else, something that would scandalise Victorian England and forever change how the expedition was remembered. The white men, the Inuit said, had eaten their dead. When Ray reported the Inuit accounts of cannibalism to the Admiralty, the British public responded with outrage and denial. Impossible. Unthinkable. British naval officers, gentlemen, resorting to cannibalism, it must be a misunderstanding, a mistranslation, or a malicious lie. Lady Franklin herself led the backlash, publicly denouncing Ray, accusing him of defaming her husband's memory and giving credence to savage testimony over British honour. Charles Dickens, the famous novelist and a friend of Lady Franklin, wrote scathing articles defending the expedition's morality and suggesting the Inuit themselves might be responsible for any bodies found in suspicious condition. But Ray had the artefacts, and more evidence would emerge. In 1859, an expedition led by Francis McClintock discovered the cairn at Victory Point and the message inside, the last official record of the Franklin expedition, confirming Franklin's death, the abandonment of the ships, the plan to march to the Back River. They also found a boat. It was mounted on a sledge, pointing back north toward the ships rather than south toward Salvation, a detail that has puzzled historians ever since. Inside were 2 skeletons and an astounding collection of items: clothing, books, chocolate, tea, tobacco, and yes, silver spoons. Everything except adequate food supplies, and the skeletons showed signs that made even hardened Arctic explorers uncomfortable. Bones cracked and split, skulls with fractures consistent with blunt trauma, evidence of deliberate dismemberment. The Inuit had been telling the truth. Over the following decades, as more remains were discovered scattered across King William Island and the Adelaide Peninsula, the evidence became undeniable. Cut marks on bones consistent with defleshing, bones broken to extract marrow, skulls open to access the brain, the archaeological signature of survival cannibalism, desperate and end stage. In 1981, a team of scientists led by Dr. Owen Beatty exhumed the 3 bodies from Beechey Island, Torrington, Hartnell, and Brain. The permafrost had preserved them remarkably well, and autopsies were performed using modern forensic techniques. The findings were shocking. Lead levels in the tissues were extraordinarily high, 10 times normal levels. The tinned food, sealed with lead solder, had been poisoning the entire expedition from the beginning. Combined with scurvy from degraded lemon juice and the general stresses of Arctic survival, it created a perfect storm of physiological failure. You weren't just unlucky, you were poisoned from the start, making all the wrong decisions because your brains were literally being damaged by neurotoxins, your bodies weakened before you even entered the real danger. For over 160 years, the final resting places of Erebus and Terror remained unknown. The ships had vanished as completely as their crews, swallowed by the Arctic, leaving only legends and speculation. Then, in September 2014, a search expedition led by Parks Canada, using side-scan sonar, discovered a shipwreck in Wilmot and Crampton Bay, south of King William Island. The wreck was in remarkably good condition, sitting upright in about 11 metres of water, her structure intact. On October 1st, 2014, Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper announced that the wreck was HMS Erebus. 2 years later, in September 2016, the same team found HMS Terror in Terror Bay, also remarkably well preserved, sitting upright in 24 metres of water. Both ships have since been extensively studied by the underwater archaeologists. They've revealed details about the expedition's final days, provisions still stored in holds, personal effects in cabins, the physical layout of the vessels that carried you north with such confidence. But they haven't revealed everything. The ships were abandoned before they sank, so they don't contain the final chapter of your story. That chapter is written in bones scattered across King William Island, in Inuit oral histories, in the forensic evidence of desperation. And in 2024, DNA analysis finally gave names to some of those bones. Using genetic material extracted from teeth and matched against living descendants, researchers identified Captain James Fitzjames, the charismatic young officer everyone loved, from a jawbone found at Erebus Bay. The jawbone showed cut marks consistent with cannibalism. Fitzjames, the expedition's heart, died and was consumed by his shipmates in their final desperate hours. The man who wrote poetry and sketched landscapes became protein for men who had run out of options. That's how the Franklin expedition ended. Not with heroic sacrifice or noble endurance, but with the complete breakdown of everything that makes us human, reduced to the most primal equation: consume or die. So let's answer the question posed at the beginning. Would you survive the Franklin expedition? No, almost certainly not. Because survival wasn't about strength, intelligence, experience, or courage. It was about factors beyond anyone's control: the weather. That particular year, 1846 to 1848, the Arctic experienced some of the worst ice conditions in recorded history. The passage that seemed so close, so achievable, was blocked by multi-year ice that wouldn't break up. Even the most skilled ice master couldn't navigate through solid ice. The food poisoning. The lead solder used to seal the tins was slowly destroying everyone's health from the inside, making rational decisions impossible, weakening bodies that needed to be strong. You couldn't choose not to eat the poisoned food. It was the only food available. The route choice. Franklin chose the western route around King William Island, which led into the heaviest, most persistent ice. Had he chosen the eastern route, you might have made it through. But he didn't know, couldn't know. The maps were incomplete, the geographical knowledge insufficient, the timing. If you'd been trapped in any other location, you might have been found by search parties. But you were in the one place at the one time where no one thought to look until it was far too late. Luck. Pure, blind, indifferent luck. And yours ran out the moment you sailed into Lancaster Sound. Maybe you would have been one of the first to die aboard the ships, buried in the ice with a marked grave and your name recorded. That might have been mercy. A relatively quick death, surrounded by shipmates, with some dignity and tact. Or maybe you would have been one of the last, walking across the ice, consuming the unthinkable, watching your companions fall one by one until you were alone. Was that better, or infinitely worse? There's no good answer. There's just death, delayed by varying amounts of time and purchased at varying cost to your humanity. What does the Franklin expedition teach us? That confidence without humility is dangerous. The expedition was so certain of success, so confident in British technology and capability, that they underestimated the Arctic's power. Hubris is expensive in the polar regions. That preparation isn't always enough. You can plan meticulously, provision carefully, equip thoroughly, and still fail catastrophically if conditions turn against you. Sometimes the universe simply says no. That civilization is fragile. The rules and norms that govern society, morality, hierarchy, taboo, all require resources to maintain. Remove those resources, apply enough pressure, and the structures collapse frighteningly quickly. We're all much closer to our primal selves than we'd like to believe. That the Arctic doesn't care about your courage, your technology, your noble goals. It's indifferent, inhuman, operating by rules that have nothing to do with human values or desires. You can't negotiate with weather. You can't reason with cold. You can only endure or fail. And most importantly, that every man who died on that expedition was real. They had names, families, hopes, fears. They weren't just statistics or historical footnotes. They were human beings who suffered terribly and died alone in the most hostile environment on Earth. Remembering them, speaking their names, telling their story, honouring their memory is the least we can do. But that's enough for tonight. You've walked with them long enough. You've felt what they felt, seen what they saw, endured a fraction of what they endured. Now it's time to let them rest. And for you to rest too. You're safe here, in your warm bed, in your safe home. The Arctic can't touch you. The cold is locked outside. The hunger is imaginary, easily satisfied with a trip to the kitchen. Close your eyes now. Let the story fade into memory. Let the images soften and blur. The men of the Franklin expedition have been resting for over 70 years now. Their suffering is long over. Their bodies are scattered across the Arctic, slowly returning to the Earth, their molecules joining the eternal cycle of matter and energy. They are at peace, finally, and you can be too. Your breathing slows, deepens, the tension in your muscles releases, unwinding like rope uncoiling. You're not on the ice, you're not starving, you're not dying. You're here, you're warm, you're alive. Sleep comes gently now, like snow falling on quiet water, soft and inexorable and kind. And as you drift away, remember this. By listening to their story, by walking beside them for these few hours, you've given them something they didn't have in life. Witness, memory, someone who knows what happened, who who understands, who won't let them be forgotten. That matters. It doesn't change the past, doesn't ease their suffering, but it matters. They were real. They lived. They tried. They failed. They died. But they're not forgotten, and neither are you. Sleep well. The Arctic is far away tonight, and you are safe.